one. There's a wonderful museum at the base of the tower that I really recommend you come visit. It's called the Institute of Texan Cultures. It's big, it's interactive, great for kids and adults. I'm sure they're coming from it right now. The theater to our left is also a remnant from the fair. It was named for a former mayor of ours, Lila. She was our first woman mayor elected soon after the World's Fair in 1970. Been the home to our symphony, our ballet, our opera over the years. The building is also remembered for the mosaic up above her name. It's called the Confluence of Civilizations. It was the theme of our World's Fair. It's a little over 130 feet long and 22 feet high.
Wow.
The whole thing was done by one man, an artist out of Mexico City named Juan O'Gorman. Now, Mr. O'Gorman arrived in San Antonio in early '67. He was a very diligent man.
Oh, yeah.
He spent the next 10.5 months up there by himself, hand placing the just over 430,000 little 1-by-1 inch tiles that he had mined throughout the Americas the 2 years prior to the fair. From 1965 to '67, O'Gorman traveled from Canada south to Chile. Hit 11 countries on his way south. Each one he visited, he brought out an indigenous stone to represent him on the work. By the time he was done, he'd collected 500,000 of these stones. He had 11 different colors of natural rock. Spent the next 10.5 months up there by himself, hand placing the just over 430,000 tiles that it took to make up the work. It's really a testament to patience and to art. Yeah, we've got a visitor on our river this morning. There were several of them earlier. Those white cranes are migratory. They spend their summers up in northern Michigan and they come down in winter just south of town. And they come over here for some easy fishing. The light in here is flat and it's easy for them to see the fish under the water. That bird is my arch enemy. That's why I wear this big hat. Now, if you guys would like to head over to the Tower of the Americas this morning, easy way to get there is follow the path that our boat has taken and walk through this area right here on our right-hand side. It's called the Grotto. When you come out of the Grotto, the tower is just around the corner from here. It's about a 2-minute walk, and it's very much worth the effort. I don't know if you know this or not, but in Texas, if you open a tower of any significant height, you have to put a revolving restaurant on top, I think. And we certainly did. There's a good one up there. It's called the Chart House. Observation deck above there, too. This evening, when all of our 3 million Christmas lights come on, twinkling in glory, go up there at the top of the tower and take a look at the river from above. It's a lovely sight. And today, Monday through Thursday, the restaurant up there offers a happy hour starting at 4:30 and goes till 7. You can ride the elevator up for free. You go up there and take that 1-hour turn with a half-price margarita in your hand. It's the only way to do it. What San Antonians do. This is the whitewater portion of our river. Don't enjoy that. This island that we're coming by on our left-hand side is actually home to a pump house that helps us circulate water out of this part of the river. Now, as we come out of here and go by the mosaic one more time, I would like to tell you about the man that our convention center is named for, a great Texan named Henry B. Gonzalez. Henry was the first Mexican-American elected to Congress. San Antonio elected him back in 1961. He served San Antonio for 40 years. He was a very good man. He was vital in bringing the World's Fair to our city. And as much as the cattle business had 100 years before, the World's Fair changed San Antonio again. We became this destination city we are now. Henry was also very important in bringing the military to our city. The entire time that he was in office, he worked to bring to San Antonio what he loved to call an agile and active military. And by the time he passed away, San Antonio was home to 5 military bases, 4 Air Force bases, and an Army base. San Antonio, we proudly call ourselves Military City, USA. We are the 7th largest city in the United States. There's 1.4 million people that live inside our city limits. And nearly 30% of our city has something to do with the military. Either into service now, prior service, active duty, or retirement community. It is really the essence of who we are. Now, over the years, we have added to the river, grown it to kind of suit the city's needs. This canal we're on now was done in 1967 for our World's Fair. 20 years after that, we had a little bit of money in our pocket, decided we would add more river. We dredged 500 feet of new river, dredged it deep, and we put in the most dangerous part of our river walk. We built the mall. That's where we're going now. Now, up until 1985, as we swing around here, that big rock wall you see in front of our boat swept all the way around to our right. There was nothing back here but an old hotel that sat on the other side of what is now the Commerce Street Bridge that we're going to come under. But back then, of course, it wasn't a bridge, it was just a stream. And the hotel on the other side, known as the Fairmont, sat right where the river was to come. Now, the Fairmont for 75 years was our nicest hotel. It really was the place to stay if you had the money. It had gotten a little bit worn out in its later years, shabby really. But the Fairmont had survived this great flood back in 1921, and we're very protective of those old buildings since so few of them had. Now, we weren't going to tear the Fairmont down, but it did lay right where the river was to go. So instead of tearing it down, we moved it. This doesn't sound like much till you see it. The Fairmont is a 3-story building. It weighs 1,600 tons.
Wow.
We know that because we dug underneath its foundation, used these jacks, these hydraulic jacks, to raise the building, the entire structure, all 1,400 tons, 4 feet off the ground. Once it was high enough, we put axles underneath it, tractor tires on, and then we just rolled it away. We made the Fairmont the biggest mobile home in history. We rolled that building nearly a mile down our city streets.
Wow.
It's something to see. It really was a sight. It's down in La Villita. I'm going to take you where it is, redone to its original glory. Moving of the Fairmont made way for the mall back in here and everything followed. Now the mall, once you're inside, is pretty standard stuff. There's 125 stores. It's anchored by a Macy's department store. There's a food court right there on the first floor, a movie theater with 2 IMAX screens up on the second. This lagoon has really become a jewel. While that Christmas tree is lovely, it's certainly not our official Christmas tree here in San Antonio. That is in front of the Alamo. It's 110-foot tall white fir adorned with Spurs paraphernalia, our world champion NBA San Antonio Spurs that we're very proud of. Go by and see it as lovely. If you would like to learn a little bit more about the Battle of the Alamo, up on the movie screens, on the hour, every hour, there's a movie that is shown called The Alamo, Price of Freedom. It is the story of the battle that was fought back in 1836. A 13-day battle that ended with all Texas fighters dying. It ended, though, with our independence fully gained. Come back and see it. I promise you, you'll enjoy it. A good story of how we came to be. The story of the Battle of the Alamo hold in great esteem down here.
Inside the...
Yes. It's only about 45 minutes long. It won't take up too much of your time, but it will explain a little bit of why we are so proud of what happened in that fight back in 1836. Right at 200 soldiers taking on nearly 8,000, fighting for 13 days. Losing the battle but winning the war. Our independence won in the battle fought. Now as we leave from here, I want to tell you how San Antonio began. The first Europeans to arrive on our river, the first to actually set foot in the waters, were Spanish missionaries. A small group of remarkably brave men. They were led by a young priest named Damian Massenet. They reached our river on June the 13th of 1691.
Wow.
San Antonio, in one shape or form, we've been around ever since then. In fact, the reason our city is known as San Antonio goes to the day they arrived. You see, June 13th on the Catholic calendar is a holy day. It's known as the Feast of St. Anthony de Padua, the Feast of San Antonio. A day that these missionaries were destined to celebrate no matter where they were. They literally just stumbled onto the river. The leader of this group, Massenet, saw the river as a miracle. To find it in the middle of South Texas on his patron saint's birthday, a day worthy of a good celebration. So Massenet gathered his men around him. He led the first Catholic Mass north of the Rio Grande on our riverbanks. I'll take you where he did it. Had a good meal that day, white-tailed deer, javelina hog on the menu. In this celebration, Father Massenet named the river San Antonio. See, the river was named San Antonio. Our city is named after the river. It's not the other way around. And the statue there to our right-hand side, right on there on the sidewalk, that's San Antonio, St. Anthony de Padua. Our city takes its name from him, the patron saint to the children and the lost. The statue was a gift to San Antonio from the Portuguese. San Antonio de Padua is Portuguese born. We share that root. Now, before the missionaries arrived, the river had a different name, of course. It was rather a mouthful. The river was known as Yanaguana. Yanaguana means peaceful waters. It was given that name by the Native Americans who'd lived here forever. They were known as the Payaya. Another $10 word. The Payaya were the reason the missionaries stayed. See, the late 1600s was a time of great expansion by the Spanish. The Spanish had been down in the southern part of Mexico for nearly 200 years by the time Masson and his men arrived. The Spanish had found remarkable wealth down there. They had found the Aztec fortune, gold, oceans of silver, copper, and emeralds to be had, and they took it. And had grown wealthy. Had grown steadily into Central and South America too, chasing that wealth. The Baja region of California had recently fallen, now Texas in Spanish sights, but Texas was unique land to the Spanish. They had first reached our beach back in 1508, had come many times, though had never stayed. There was no wealth to be had in Texas. We had no gold. And as the centuries had passed, the rest of the New World had been settled. The British, of course, had been here many years. They were up in the northeast of what was becoming the United States. The Portuguese now down to their south, coming into what was becoming Brazil. The French had worked their way from Canada all the way down the Mississippi. As Masson and his missionaries arrived, Texas was French land. It had been for 50 years.
Wow.
The Spanish were aware that the French were here. They knew that they had been here for some time, but this was to be Spanish land. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of how this was to occur. Now, initially, the Spanish weren't too eager to pick a fight with the French, who had built a sizable military garrison around the mouth of the Mississippi. They controlled the French shipping lanes, or the Gulf of Mexico shipping lanes. If a fight was to be offered, a fight would certainly be given. So instead of coming into Texas to conquer, the Spanish came to convert. They sent missionaries long before soldiers. The idea was very basic and worked very well. Bring those that were already here to Catholicism. Make them Catholic, make them Spanish, plant the flag, and grow the kingdom. Masson and his missionaries arrived, and the work began. And it proved fruitful. It worked well. Within 60 years, the San Antonio River was host to 5 of these outposts that were built to house all of these newly converted Native Americans. We call them our missions. Now, our most famous mission is our Alamo. It's 100 yards behind us. The other 4 missions were built along our river as well. They start 3 miles from here and get to nearly 7 miles away. Their names are San Juan and San Jose, San Francisco de Espada and Concepcion. The 5 missions along our river go to the very beginnings of what was to become the land in New Spain, the country that was to be Texas, and the state that would keep the same name when we joined the United States.
So Alamo was the mission?
The Alamo is a mission. Now, the Alamo's true name is San Antonio de Valero. That is the name of the mission. Alamo is a nickname. It means cottonwood tree in Spanish. The Spanish government took the missions in the mid-1700s. They took them from the Catholic Church and they started stationing soldiers inside. The Spanish soldiers that inhabited San Antonio de Valero gave it the name Alamo, as the first place that those soldiers had lived in was in Mexico.
Wow.
And it was surrounded by a stand of cottonwood trees. So as they came to San Antonio, they just called where they were living the Alamo, because that's what they had called it where they were in Mexico. Just a nickname. San Antonio de Valero goes to the very beginnings of what was to become San Antonio as the first built mission. The battle fought in the same building, remembered as the Alamo, goes to the very beginnings of what was to become the country of Texas. Same building, a different time with a different name. Our missions 6 months ago were named a World Heritage Site. We joined a list of a little over 2,000 places around the world that represent man's heritage, our history. We're the first such site in Texas. Big deal for us. We're very proud of that. It took us about 25 years to earn that designation from UNESCO, the cultural side of the United Nations. Now, before we go any further, I want to tell you about this hotel that we're passing by here on our left-hand side. This is the Hilton Palacio del Rio.